If you want the woman to collect your sperm, it is very important that you take the right steps. Strengthen your emotional bond by showing empathy and understanding in the relationship. Understanding and valuing a woman's desires increases sexual attraction. With these strategies, you can create a deeper connection in your relationship and spice up your sexual life. Hello dear viewers. Today, we embark on a deep journey to discover women's mysterious sexual desires and how these desires play a role in our relationships. How do the desires, fantasies, and passions hidden in women's inner world shape our romantic relationships? Well, have you ever thought about what Stoic philosophy can teach us on this complex and fascinating subject? If these questions interest you, you are in the right place. Prepare yourself, because we will soon discuss many interesting and enlightening topics, from the psychological foundations of sexual desires to ways to keep passion alive in relationships. Watch this video until the end and let's dive into the depths of women's sexual desires together. 1. Women's role and power in sexuality. A woman's role and power in sexuality have been perceived in different ways by different societies and cultures throughout history. In the modern world, women's sexuality and their power in this regard are becoming more accepted and important. In this section, we will examine in depth the role and power of women in sexuality. We will explore how women perceive sexuality and the effects of this perception on romantic relationships. Women's control over their bodies and minds and their freedom to explore and express their own sexual desires are part of their sexual power. According to Stoic philosophy, each individual should have complete control over his or her body and desires. This control forms the basis of women's sexual power. Women's sexuality is not only a source of pleasure, but also a powerful means of attachment and emotional connection. This power helps us understand how women play a role in and shape romantic relationships. Understanding women's sexual power and the impact of this power on relationships can help men make these relationships deeper and more meaningful. In this context, accepting and respecting women's sexual power is the key to healthy and balanced relationships. This episode provides viewers with information that will help them better understand the dynamics in relationships, emphasizing the importance of women's power and role in sexuality. 2. The effect of romantic intimacy on sexual desires. Romantic closeness plays an important role in shaping women's sexual desires. When a woman feels emotionally close to her partner, it can increase her sexual desires and enable these desires to be experienced more intensely. In this chapter, we will take an in-depth look at the impact of romantic intimacy on women's sexual desires. We will explore how emotional bond in romantic relationships strengthens sexual desires and how this bond affects relationships in the long term. In the light of Stoic philosophy, we will emphasize the importance of emotional connection and closeness. Emotional closeness is fueled by trust and understanding. This closeness allows women to express their sexual desires more freely and establish a deeper connection with their partners. Additionally, romantic intimacy allows women to experience sexuality not only as a physical experience but also as an emotional and spiritual connection. Understanding this powerful connection between romantic intimacy and sexual desires is one of the keys to greater satisfaction and happiness in relationships. Therefore, strengthening emotional bonds and increasing romantic intimacy forms the basis for healthy and satisfying sexual relationships. 3. Women's secret fantasies and their importance in relationships. Women's secret fantasies occupy an important place in their sexual lives, and these fantasies, although often unspoken, have a great impact on relationships. Fantasies help the individual discover his sexual desires, and this discovery can increase the sexual dynamism in relationships. In this section, we will discuss the importance of women's sexual fantasies, which they often do not express, in relationships. We will examine how these fantasies affect women's sexual desires and their role in relationships. According to Stoic philosophy, understanding and accepting inner desires and fantasies deepens an individual's relationship with himself and his partner. Women's sexual fantasies are part of their sexual identity, and exploring these fantasies contributes to strengthening the bond between partners. Fantasies not only increase sexual satisfaction, but also reignite excitement and passion in the relationship. Partners being open to each other's fantasies and sharing these fantasies creates a deeper atmosphere of intimacy and trust in the relationship. In this context, accepting women's sexual fantasies and finding a place for these fantasies in relationships is an important part of a healthy and satisfying sexual life. These episodes provide in-depth insights into understanding the impact of women's sexual desires and fantasies on romantic relationships and guide viewers to become more aware of these issues. 4. The role of sexual communication in relationships. Open and honest communication about sexual desires is one of the cornerstones of a healthy and satisfying relationship. Sexual communication in relationships not only increases physical intimacy, but also strengthens the emotional bond and reinforces trust between partners. In this section, we will discuss the importance of open and honest communication about sexual desires. We will discuss what role sexual communication plays in relationships and how this type of communication can be achieved. In the light of Stoic philosophy, we will emphasize that honesty and openness are the keys to a healthy sexual life. Sharing sexual desires and boundaries between partners increases satisfaction and understanding in the relationship. This type of communication helps partners better understand each other's needs and expectations. Additionally, sexual communication also plays an important role as a way for partners to express their respect and love for each other. Openness and honesty in sexual communication also helps overcome problems and obstacles that may be experienced in sexual life. Therefore, in order to increase sexual satisfaction and happiness in the relationship, it is of great importance for partners to clearly express their sexual desires. As a result, sexual communication is an important element that strengthens not only physical intimacy but also emotional bonding. Partners sharing their sexual desires helps them achieve deeper understanding and satisfaction in their relationships. 5. Advice for men to understand women's sexual desires. It is critical for men to better understand women's sexual desires and be sensitive to these desires to increase satisfaction and happiness in relationships. Understanding women's sexual desires is possible with empathy and attention. In this section, we will offer practical advice for men to better understand and be sensitive to women's sexual desires. In the light of Stoic philosophy, we will emphasize the importance of empathy, understanding, and patience in relationships. Men need to establish open and honest communication with their partners to understand their sexual desires and limits. This should not be limited to just verbal communication but should also include body language and emotional cues. Respecting women's sexual desires and supporting them in the process of discovering these desires contributes to the strengthening of the bond in the relationship. In order to understand women's sexual desires, it is important for men to be patient and respect their partner's wishes. This reinforces mutual understanding and trust and increases sexual satisfaction. Additionally, understanding women's sexual desires can help men better understand their own sexual desires and needs. As a result, men approaching women with empathy, patience, and understanding to understand their sexual desires provides deeper satisfaction and happiness in relationships. 6. Maintaining passion in relationships. Maintaining passion and sexual desires in long-term relationships is one of the keys to a healthy and satisfying relationship. Various strategies are required to keep the passion alive in relationships that become monotonous over time. In this episode, we will share strategies on how to maintain passion in long-term relationships. In the light of Stoic philosophy, we will discuss ways to preserve and renew passion. To keep the passion alive in relationships, it is important for partners to constantly renew their interest in each other. This requires them to connect to each other not only sexually, but also emotionally and mentally. Finding common interests, having new experiences together, and spending romantic time together regularly helps keep the passion alive. Sharing sexual desires and fantasies can increase excitement and passion in a relationship. Partners' openness to each other's wishes and needs prevents sexual life from becoming monotonous. Additionally, open and honest sexual communication strengthens partners' trust and bond with each other. As a result, in order to maintain passion in long-term relationships, partners need to constantly show interest in each other, share new experiences, and openly express their sexual desires. This increases satisfaction and happiness in the relationship and strengthens partners' commitment to each other. These chapters offer practical and effective advice for men to understand women's sexual desires and maintain passion in long-term relationships. 7. Balancing sexual desires and relationships with Stoic philosophy. Keeping women's sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance is possible with an approach based on Stoic philosophy, which emphasizes the importance of establishing inner peace and balance. Stoicism enables the individual to understand his inner world and balance his relationships in the outside world with this understanding. In this section, we will examine ways to balance women's sexual desires and relationships in the light of Stoic philosophy. We will see how important inner peace and balance are for passionate and meaningful relationships. According to Stoicism, understanding and accepting our desires and emotions helps us gain control of these emotions. Keeping women's sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance starts with being aware of these feelings and expressing them in a healthy way. This is possible by sharing emotional and sexual desires openly and honestly. Inner peace begins with the individual understanding his or her own desires and needs. This peace helps women keep their sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance. The teachings of Stoic philosophy guide the individual to find his own inner balance and apply this balance in his relationships. Additionally, Stoic philosophy encourages the individual to adopt a more conscious and controlled approach to events and relationships in the outside world. This approach helps women experience their sexual desires and romantic relationships in a healthier and more balanced way. As a result, under the guidance of Stoic philosophy, keeping women's sexual desires and relationships in balance is possible by understanding the importance of inner peace and balance. This balance provides deeper satisfaction and happiness in relationships and allows individuals to have a healthier relationship with themselves and their partners. Balancing sexual desires and relationships with Stoic philosophy. Keeping women's sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance is possible with an approach based on Stoic philosophy, which emphasizes the importance of establishing inner peace and balance. Stoicism enables the individual to understand his inner world and balance his relationships in the outside world with this understanding. In this section, we will examine in-depth ways to balance women's sexual desires and relationships in the light of Stoic philosophy. We will see how important inner peace and balance are for passionate and meaningful relationships. According to Stoicism, understanding and accepting our desires and emotions helps us gain control of these emotions. Keeping women's sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance starts with being aware of these feelings and expressing them in a healthy way. This is possible by sharing emotional and sexual desires openly and honestly. Inner peace begins with the individual understanding his or her own desires and needs. This peace helps women keep their sexual desires and romantic relationships in balance. The teachings of Stoic philosophy guide the individual to find his own inner balance and apply this balance in his relationships. Another important way for women to keep their sexual desires and relationships in balance is to have open and honest communication with their partners. Sharing sexual desires and boundaries increases satisfaction and understanding in the relationship. This type of communication helps partners better understand each other's needs and expectations. Additionally, open and honest sexual communication strengthens partners' trust and bond with each other. Stoic philosophy encourages the individual to adopt a more conscious and controlled approach to events and relationships in the outside world. This approach helps women experience their sexual desires and romantic relationships in a healthier and more balanced way. Stoic principles reduce the negative effects of these desires on relationships by controlling the individual's emotional and sexual desires. To achieve balance, individuals must understand their own desires and needs as well as be sensitive to their partner's desires and needs. This is possible with empathy, understanding, and respect. Empathy allows partners to better understand each other's emotional and sexual needs, which creates deeper satisfaction and commitment in the relationship. According to Stoic philosophy, finding one's own inner balance brings balance and peace in relationships. This balance strengthens the individual's relationship with himself and his partner and allows him to live a healthier, more satisfying life. As a result, under the guidance of Stoic philosophy, keeping women's sexual desires and relationships in balance is possible by understanding the importance of inner peace and balance. This balance provides deeper satisfaction and happiness in relationships and allows individuals to have a healthier relationship with themselves and their partners. By applying Stoic principles to your life, you can experience your sexual desires and romantic relationships in a more balanced and satisfying way. We have come to the end of our video. We learned how you can balance women's sexual desires and relationships with Stoic philosophy. We emphasized the importance of inner peace and a balanced relationship. If these topics interested you, you can learn more by reading our article in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't forget.